Let me bring into this conversation energy expert Clyde Mallison. Clyde, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. At this point, any way of estimating how much additional power South Africa could possibly get from its neighbours?
Yes, thanks, Kathy. Good to be on your show again. Yes, well, first of all, let's just put a couple of things in perspective. We actually probably import almost as much power from our neighbours as we export. So we get a huge chunk from Mozambique via the Cahora Bassa project. And then we export to some of our neighbours. And if you balanced it all up at the moment, it's about equal. So we are net exporters to most of our neighbours.
And when it comes then to this agreement of trying to get additional power, it looks like it's Zimbabwe and Botswana that have been specifically highlighted.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the situation in Zimbabwe, but I do know Botswana have some coal-fired power stations. I think it's called Marapule A and B. I thought they were having problems, but I need to check again. But if they do have coal-fired power stations like to run at a steady pace. So I think the person you interviewed from the Botswana Power Corporation kind of indicated they produce about 580 megawatts, let's call it 600. But at night they only need 300. And so technically at the moment they have to kind of slow down the coal plants in the evening or almost push the clutch in. And what they're saying is that if South Africa wanted that power at night, Botswana's got surplus. It would simply keep its coal plant running at night and be able to export to us at night. But most of our other neighbours like Namibia at the moment are net importers from us. And in fact, Botswana probably import from the Southern African Power Pool as well at peak time. So the big problem is that we need more electricity primarily at peak times, and they're offering to sell us electricity at off-peak times and weekends. So it will help, but it won't be a massive help, if I could put it that way.
And Clyde, I must correct myself there. The other country that was specifically mentioned was Zambia and not Zimbabwe.
Right. Well, Zambia has quite a lot of power generation from hydro plants, but those tend to be subject to the vagaries of how full the rivers are in the different seasons. So certainly in rainy seasons, Zambia probably has a surplus. But in the dry seasons, they probably also have a shortage. And they also, if ever they do have a surplus, it will tend to be at night. And we already have a system in place called the Southern African Power Pool. So Eskom is a member of the Southern African Power Pool, and they would be able to purchase electricity off the power pool at night. I think what they seem to be talking about is a kind of a bilateral, longer-term relationship. It's quite interesting because many years ago, Botswana, they were trying to build a coal-fired power station just close to the border, close to Medupi, in fact. And Eskom didn't want to sign the power purchase agreement for electricity from Botswana for a new coal plant in Botswana, and that whole project floundered. It was listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and the whole thing fell through. So it's interesting to me to see that we're changing our relationship with our neighbours, where we are more willing to trade electricity with them rather than always just to be looking to sell electricity to them.
I guess it's a sign of the times in many ways.
Yes.
When you look at how much then the costs associated with this might be, does this automatically mean that Eskom is going to have to spend a lot more on procuring energy, which of course may inevitably end up with consumers, that cost?
Well, actually, on the power pool itself, the cost of electricity at night is very, very low because everyone's got enough at night, or most people have enough at night, and on the weekends, in fact. So if Eskom were to negotiate cleverly to buy surpluses at those off-peak times, they could probably get it at prices that were very competitive. They wouldn't need. It's the power that's not available at the peak times that gets top dollar. So if one looks at the trading on the Southern African power pool, at the off-peak times, the cost of electricity is $3 or $4 cents a kilowatt hour, which translates to about, 50 or 60 cents. And at peak times, it's as much as 5 rand. So at the peak times, if one had spare power at the moment at peak times, you could trade it on the South African power pool at close to 5 rand a kilowatt hour. Whereas at off-peak times, it's more like 50 cents. There's a tenfold difference in price depending on when that power is available. But the one thing that really excites me is that we currently export, around about 60% of Namibia's power comes from South Africa at various, both in peak and off-peak time. And Namibia has the potential to be one of the first countries in the world to be 100% renewable. They could do it inside of 3 years, and they would actually lower their electricity price, and they would then be able to export surpluses that they would generate to South Africa. So just looking at Namibia, we could turn a minus 500 that we send to Namibia into a plus 500 that we imported back from them. And that would actually be equivalent to one stage of load shedding. So when we're looking for solutions to load shedding, I believe we should look at the whole of SADC and not just South Africa in isolation. And by helping one of our neighbors become completely renewable, we're actually helping ourselves at the same time.
Clyde, just before I wrap up with you then, realistically, how long is it going to take for some of these agreements to be concluded and this additional energy to come on board?
Well, if Botswana Power Corporation have surplus right as we speak now, it should be able to happen within a day, in my opinion. There's no need to, the power pool's in place. Eskom are participants on it, and they should be able to buy like tomorrow, basically. And the advantage of buying at the weekends at off-peak times is that sometimes we have load shedding at weekends to replenish our pump storage reserves. In other words, to pump water back on top of the hill for the next week. And so if we could get some electricity from Botswana, let's say, 200 megawatts, it would literally take 20% of one stage of load shedding off of our books, as it were, and we could use that surplus to assist with filling up our pump storage, which would then give us extra capacity to inject into the system at peak times.
Energy expert Clyde Mallison, we're going to leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your time.